Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Here are the headlines from across the continent of Africa this morning. The Standard newspaper from Kenya. Gachagwa's 1.59 billion Kenya shillings bill for office and wife. Documents from Treasury show 2 days after Supreme Court upheld the election win, Deputy President asked for money to purchase cars, fuel, and second lady's activities. That story is on page 6. New survey shows marriage driving women to own property. The story is on page 3. Cost of living Azimio plan siege on government offices. You'll find that on page 4. And oil marketers in court over fuel monopoly deal. UN says M23 ignoring ceasefire, and tough times, shilling hits record low, and golfers ready for magical Kenya Open. All this on the front page of the Standard newspaper. The Star newspaper. MPs push for probe into Uhuru era killings. Lawmakers want commission of inquiry to unearth those behind the forced disappearances. You'll find that story on page 4 and 5. And then the main pictorial, ministers oversee relief food distribution. And just down there, education CS Ezekiel Machogu shares a meal with school children and residents when they visited Wajir and Marsabit counties to assess the drought situation and oversee relief food distribution yesterday. Okay, so Ruto Raila headed for clash as Azimio threatened to storm key state offices. And then Kenya gets fertile land in Zambia to grow more maize for food security. We joke too much. But anyway, we have enough arable land in this country, but hey, the story is on page 9. The Daily Nation. Raila's D-Day. Azimio leader Raila Odinga's 14-day ultimatum to President William Ruto to open poll servers and address the high cost of living lapsed yesterday, with the opposition chief threatening mass action and civil disobedience should his demands not be met. The president has called his bluff, saying he won't be intimidated. Who will blink first? The Nation is asking. The story is on page 4 and 5. I didn't coerce Nyakango to approve 15 billion Kenya shillings payment, says Yatani. Pomp and color as Kenyans mark International Women's Day. And then electricity prices jump 10% on costly fuel and a weak shilling. That's not a very good news for Kenyans now, because it's already tough, and some of these essential services and goods, when the prices go up, everything else gets affected. So all right, so let's look at some other newspapers from across the region. The Daily News from Zimbabwe. ZANU PF to hold a crunch meeting at this year's national polls, as this year's national polls get ever closer. The Herald. Zimbabwe on growth trajectory. The news there as well from Zimbabwe. ZEP holders, UN rings alarm bells. And then the Citizen from Tanzania, democracy is our common goal, Samia tells opposition. The Daily Monitor, man hires medical doctor to kill wife. And the New Times, that is from Rwanda, what declining number of Rwandans in farming means. The Vanguard from Nigeria, Beavers INEC shifts Guba assembly polls to March 18th. That is the conversation I'd like for us to have just shortly after I'm done with these news headlines, because I don't know what's happening there in Nigeria. And The Nation as well, from Nigeria, INEC shifts governorship assembly polls by 1 week. The Daily Trust from there as well, why we postponed governorship elections. INEC Commission gets nod to reconfigure beavers. Tinubu Atiku granted access to the election materials. Buhari arrives Daura for polls. The Punch from Nigeria as well. INEC shifts governorship assembly polls by 1 week. So that is what we have on the headlines from those newspapers from across Africa. Let's see others from outside the continent. The Daily Telegraph from the UK. Hancock's Chinese lab leak claims censored. And then the Metro, Our Little Princess. The Guardian as well from the UK. Sunak facing clash with EU on unlawful asylum plans. And then the Daily Mail. Is Linka about to get boot from BBC? Sorry. That is the main headline there. And the Daily Mirror from the UK as well. Lenka, I will never be silenced. Okay, so that is what we have there. It's another scandal that has been brewing. If I had time, I would have told you about it, but we have so much going on here in Africa, so let's just focus our attention on things that actually do matter to us. Let's look at the weather conditions in a few cities across the continent this morning. And the weather in Nairobi, it's going to be highs of 29 degrees Celsius and 17 degrees Celsius lows, and it's going to be mostly sunny. Johannesburg is going to be mostly sunny with highs of 28 degrees Celsius and lows of 14 degrees Celsius. Abuja, 37 degrees Celsius on the high, and on the low 24 degrees Celsius, and it's going to be partly cloudy there in Abuja. And in Alexandria in Egypt, it's going to be 13 degrees Celsius, and then it's going to be partly cloudy, and Bujumbura as well, 21 degrees Celsius, partly cloudy, but mostly it's going to be a sunny day. And in Harare, 24 degrees Celsius, a bit of some cloudy situations they're expected, but mostly it's going to be sunny there. And in Luanda, 25 degrees Celsius, and it's going to be a bit more cloudy and just a bit of sunshine there in Luanda. And Casablanca, it is a very gloomy day there. Temperatures are low at 15 degrees Celsius. It is going to be cloudy and a very gloomy weather in Casablanca. And in Algiers, 17 degrees Celsius, and it's going to be sunny all day long. So that is what we have. And there are two storms that may be on deck for northeastern United States, and California at risk of life-threatening flooding. Snow, a welcome sight for this beloved winter sport. All of these are from the US. And then massive storm to deliver heavy snow to central US. The winter in the US and those countries in the Western world has just refused to go away. But now they're usually in spring. Winter ends towards the end of February, but it has overstayed, and those are effects of the climate change that is experienced across the world. A bit of some sports news. Let me see what I can get us before I get into the conversations at the back page on the Standard newspaper. Like real soldiers, the Blues march on. Chelsea have progressed from 5 Champions League knockout stage after losing the first leg. The Blues beat Dortmund 2-0 to advance to Champions League quarterfinals. And then hooligan who punched a Saliva goalkeeper jailed for 2 months. And Magical Kenya Open. It is finally time to tee off and kiss trophy at Muthaiga. 156 players to battle for the 252 million Kenya shillings golf jackpot. And Chief CJ Wangai is the latest inclusion in Kenya's golf team that has 9 pros and 6 amateurs. And then joy as Kenyan coaches take part in CAF Elite Instructors course. And then 7-0 humiliation makes Manchester United fan rich. What? They did bet. And then why Saturday's Kenya Cup final is special for Amonde. Former Shujaa captain will be aiming to win his 6th Kenyan Cup title with KCB against Cabras. This will be the 6th meeting between the two sides in the final. So I guess that is what you have in the sports pages. I will not look at the rest of the newspapers because we have so much to talk about, and you are now up to date. And a very good morning to you. About 10 minutes past 10 here in Nairobi. Thank you so much for your time. Very well. So Nigeria's Electoral Commission has postponed elections for state governors and local assemblies by 1 week. Following a court decision over machines used in tallying of votes, the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) said the move will allow more time for the so-called Beavers machines to be reconfigured and deployed for the upcoming vote. The polls, which had been scheduled to take place on Saturday, will now be held on the 18th of March. A court earlier on Wednesday had rejected an opposition demand to halt the reconfiguration of beavers as their teams could check for forensic evidence of ballot rigging claims. But INEC said the legal challenge had held up preparations and the machines would not be ready in time. The opposition has disputed last month's election victory by President-elect Bolu Tinubu, and INEC introduced the beavers for the first time as part of the new technologies heavily used in this year election in a bid to improve transparency. But observer groups and opposition parties said huge delays in voting and failures in the system when uploading tallies allowed for ballot disparities during presidential election. And so I was just going through this story, and while I was reading to you the headlines from Nigeria, I think that is the main story, and I'm not exactly surprised, but I am, perplexed because of this decision that INEC has decided to make. So there were a bit of maybe let me just read before I get into the heart of that conversation. Let me read a report after the elections by the Commonwealth Observers Report, and then the U.S. State of Department report, and let's see what they made of the elections in Zimbabwe. So the Commonwealth Observers report in the just concluded elections in Nigeria. Nigeria's 2023 general elections were largely peaceful despite administrative and logical hurdles at many polling units, according to the independent group of Commonwealth observers. The chairperson of the Commonwealth Observer Group, from former President of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, delivered his team's preliminary assessment of the electoral process at a press conference in Abuja on February the 27th, saying Nigerians were largely accorded the right to vote, so that they did not dispute that Nigerians showed up to vote. And of course, the figures that we have so far seen, and that even the final tally that made Tinubu president-elect, you could see there was a lot of voter apathy in that regard. A conversation for another day. Now, addressing the journalist, President Mbeki said, "We congratulate all Nigerians for their determination, patience and resilience displayed throughout the electoral process as Nigeria awaits for the final results," which I think they already have that. So this was the preliminary results just after the votes were counted, after the voting was through, and now the tallying process and the counting process was in session. And Thabo Mbeki said, "We call on all those as Nigerians awaits for the final results." He encouraged all citizens to exercise patience to allow the country's Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, and its staff to conclude the results process peacefully. "We call on all those with grievances to address disputes through prescribed legal channels," President Mbeki said. "The time now is for restraint and continued patience as we await the final results." He commended the commitment shown by voters despite the late arrival of election officials and materials at many polling units, technical issues with biometric identification machines, in some cases, and delays with the live results transmission system. And President Mbeki also praised the polling officials for conducting their duties diligently, while noting some inconsistencies in procedures, particularly in the positioning of some polling booths, which compromised the secrecy of the ballot, as well as lack of advance voting for those deployed on the election day. And delivering the group's preliminary assessment, he expressed that as voting hours extended into the night due to the late openings, some polling units were ill-equipped with proper lighting to facilitate voting and counting in the dark. So as much as I think the report by Commonwealth and that observer mission was headed by former South African President Thabo Mbeki, I think it was quite balanced in a way that they were able to observe and the report that they initially gave, but we shall be waiting for their full report. So that is just what Commonwealth said. Now let's see what the United States Department of State said. in the report that was released on the 1st of March. And the United States congratulates the people of Nigeria and President-elect Tinubu and all political leaders following the declaration by Nigeria's Independent National Electoral Commission on the results of the February 25th presidential election. The competitive election represents a new period for Nigerian politics and democracy. Each of the top 3 candidates was the leading vote getter in 12 states, a remarkable first in Nigeria's modern political era, reflecting the diversity of views that characterized the campaign and the wishes of Nigerians voters. We understand that many Nigerians and some of the parties have expressed frustration about the manner in which the process was conducted and the shortcomings of technical elements that were used for the first time in a presidential election cycle. Nigerians are clearly within their right to have such concerns and should have high expectations for their electoral processes. We join other international observers in urging INEC to improve in the areas that need the most attention ahead of the March 11th gubernatorial elections. Now, there are well-established mechanisms in place for the adjudication of electoral disputes, and we encourage any candidate on all parties seeking to challenge the outcome to pursue redress through those mechanisms. We call on all parties, candidates and supporters to refrain from violence or inflammatory rhetoric at this critical time. And this statement ended by saying we commend the active participation of civil society and the media for advancing electoral norms and political discourse on issues of importance. And then a few statements towards the end. And I want us to look at the opposition's position and the just concluded election, and then we shall just get into that conversation. I want us to get all these perspectives, and then we see this postponement by INEC of the governor's election, what this perhaps might mean for the just concluded presidential elections. Now, on Monday, members and supporters of the People's Democratic Party took to the streets to protest the recently announced results of the presidential election. Led by Abubakar Atiku, who finished second in the polls, the opposition demonstrators walked to the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC's) office in Abuja and submitted a petition proclaiming electoral fraud. The provisions of the current electoral law have been completely contravened, Atiku said. This protest is going to continue for a very long time. He added, either every day or every other day. I don't know if he's been able to to protest after that, but there was a protest that was led by Atiku Abubakar. Now, the demonstration dubbed black uniforms, so a majority of the participants wear black clothes, including Atiku, as he called for a new election. Nigeria is Africa's largest democracy with 93.4 million registered voters, according to INEC data. The country voted in a hotly contested election in February the 25th, with voter turnout reportedly standing at 27%, lower than it was in 2019. INEC declared Bola Tinubu of the ruling All Progressive Congress the winner with 37% of the vote. Tinubu was followed by Abubakar Atiku with 29%, and Peter Obi of the Labour Party came in third with 25% of the vote. Tinubu is set to take over from President Muhammadu Buhari in May. Buhari has served the maximum two-term limits. And the federal court, this was yesterday, the federal court in Lagos ordered the Independent National Electoral Commission to directly and electronically upload from the polling units to the IREV the results of the forthcoming governorship and State House of Assembly elections in Lagos State. Justice Peter Lifu made the order while delivering judgment on a suit filed by Labour Party and 41 others, in which they sought an order of mandamus to compel INEC to obey the Electoral Act and its guidelines for the conduct of the elections. The judge held that the court had the jurisdiction to entertain the suit because it was commenced in accordance with the provisions of the law. He also held that the subject matter of the suit was not a pre-election issue because the relief sought by the applicants deal with preparation for elections and not the conduct of the elections. And Justice Lifu further stated, that all the applicants were trying to do was to compel the electoral body to comply with the Constitution, its regulations and guidelines, following its failure to do so during the presidential and National Assembly elections held on February the 25th. So let's just pay attention to those words that Judge Justice Lifo mentioned when he was making his ruling on this case, that he said the applicants who filed this case were trying to do so to compel the electoral body to comply with the Constitution, its regulations and guidelines, following its failure to do so. So what the judge is saying, INEC did not comply, did not pay attention to the Constitution and its regulations and its guidelines as far as the electoral laws in Nigeria is concerned. So he's saying failure for this electoral body to not follow what it is supposed to do as far as the Constitution of Nigeria is concerned. So therefore, the judge is now advising, or the judge is now ruling, that INEC must make sure it does follow and comply with the Constitution, even as it readies to lead the exercise during the governorship voting that now I just mentioned there has been postponed. Was meant to take place on the 11th, and now it has been moved to the 18th of this month. So now by the judge making such statements, and then by INEC postponing, because the INEC said it is postponing to ensure that it reconfigures. Let me make sure I just get the exact words. The Independent National Electoral Commission said the move will allow more time for the so-called beavers machines to be reconfigured and deployed for the upcoming vote. So for INEC to come out and say and give this reason as to why the elections must be moved to the 18th of this month, what perhaps INEC is now saying that these machines could be having some problems, and if these machines could be having this problem, then this case that is being brought to the apex court in Nigeria challenging the results of the presidential elections, you just give them a folder there by INEC's admission, and INEC taking this decision to postpone these elections. You're saying there's a problem with these machines. And remember, issues had been raised with the candidates who said there was a problem with the tallying, there was a problem with the relaying of the results, there's a problem in some areas, even these machines are failed. And not just the candidates who participated in this year's elections, the observer mission in the Commonwealth also pointed out these issues. And I was going through that statement by the from the U.S. State Department. They also pointed out the issues with the technology that was used on the voting and the tallying the beavers, and other bodies also pointed out. So for INEC to say the reason why they're postponing the governorship elections is to reconfigure these machines. What are you reconfiguring? And why was it not reconfigured when you're having the presidential elections? Because by you going ahead and reconfigure these machines, you are admitting that these machines have a problem. And so the people who are already going to file, I don't know if they already have, but they're preparing to file their case in the courts. I don't know how much time the courts in Nigeria allow for a petition to be filed and the process and how long that takes. But this is an admission that you failed in your part to ensure that you comply from what this judge is saying. You failed to comply with the Constitution and its regulations and the guidelines following it, during the presidential election and the National Assembly elections that were held in February the 25th. So now you have to go back and reconfigure these devices and try to see if at all the governorship elections will be done in a way that complies with the constitution. I think this is a very grave matter. I think this now again has really exposed the ineptness of INEC there in Nigeria and the ill preparation. We talked about this while the elections were ongoing and after the elections and during the counting and the tallying of those votes. I think the Nigerian government and also the Independent National Electoral Commission of Nigeria, they were ill prepared, and you can see by it coming out now and saying it requires time for it to go and reconfigure these electronic devices to ensure that they are able to work in a way that they're supposed to be working. And so you wonder, how are they working during the presidential elections? Can the people of Nigeria who woke up so early in the morning to go cast their votes have confidence at the part in which these electronic devices played in this electioneering process? Can it be trusted? The results that were relayed, were they the actual results? Was there a problem with these beavers? Because you can tell us that now Nigerians have to agree with the results that came out of that presidential elections, and the results then were free and fair and could be verifiable. But at the same time, over a week later now, you have to go work on these same machines that delivered the other results. There is a problem, and that I think will create a huge discrepancy in the manner in which even these results perhaps will tally for the presidential election and for the upcoming governor's election. So this is something that, I'm sure even the candidates there who were headed to the courts and other, the people who participated in this year's election, I'm sure this is something that they will use in their petition, because it appears to me that INEC has just shot itself on the foot by it saying that it requires time. It requires time, and that's why it needs for the election of the governors to be postponed, because it needs to reconfigure, meaning these machines had a problem, INEC. So you just shot yourself on the foot. So while this case will be continuing in the courts for the candidates who will be filing these cases, and they will be challenging the functionality of these beavers, you can't have your lawyers now. They are saying, no, these beavers did a great job. These beavers, were functioning very well. Because if they're functioning very well during the presidential elections, there will be no need to reconfigure them. You will just use them. I mean, how long ago was that election? On the 25th, all right? And then the counting started just shortly thereafter. So how many days ago was that? It's about 2 weeks or so, almost, right? Because the elections for the governors were supposed to come 2 weeks later on the 11th. Today is the 9th of March. So that was supposed to happen in a day or so. And so you can't say between then and now, because these machines are still the same. So nothing much has changed. So what you're saying is, what you're inadvertently saying to the people of Nigeria is that you really can't trust the results that we issued to you, that these machines relayed in the presidential elections. That's what you're saying. That's what you're saying. That's what you're saying in plain words. And that, I think, if these candidates have good lawyers in that court and they're able to prosecute this case based on just these blunders that INEC has caused, then this will be, I think, an easy case to look at. But sometimes it's never that easy, especially in this case, electoral cases across Africa. This is wrong, INEC. And if you're not ready to conduct these elections, you should have postponed them, surely. It would not have been the first time that you had to postpone our presidential election. You did that in 2019, remember? Just a few hours before our Nigerians went to the poll. You postponed the election. So if you felt you're not fully prepared, if you felt you are so unsure, about the about the machines, the electronic devices that you're going to use in your elections, in conducting these elections, then that is exactly what you should have told Nigerians. This is a new technology that you're trying to use for the first time, but we seems to be having a bit of some challenges because we've not tried them very well, and so we're not sure how they're going to work, and maybe we need more time for testing. We need more time to be sure. We need more time to reconfigure. We need more time to ensure, to just check all these machines and make sure that they will be, should we use them in an election, they will be performing optimally. But you failed to do that. So now, just almost two weeks later, you're telling us now that you have to reconfigure these machines because for them to perform well, for them to work well. That means they didn't work well during the presidential elections, and I think that will be your word against the candidates who will go to challenge the results, because the opposition has said that they're going to the court and they're going to challenge these results. And based on what you're now saying, they seem to be having a case. Their concerns are legitimate. Their concerns are legitimate, and I don't see how INEC will get itself out of this. I think INEC will have so much to prove on this case, and it has to prove on that. So it's quite interesting. And then what this judge said yesterday, Justice Lifu, I think just adds more weight to the case by these opposition figures who have gone to court to challenge the results of these elections, who said that INEC during the presidential election did not comply with the constitution and its regulations and its guidelines. And so let me just read a bit of that, word to word, what the judge said. Therefore, the court granted the applicants an order of mandamus directing and compelling the defendant and all its agents, that is the INEC, and their privates or any persons acting under their directions, to comply with and enforce the provision of Clause 37 of the Regulations and Guidelines for the Conduct of Elections 2022 for the conduct of the governorship and House of Assembly elections in Lagos State on 11th of March 2023, to wit, mandating the presiding officer of all polling units to paste the publication of results poster EC 60E at the polling units conspicuously after completing the EC and A results sheet. So to make the results open and to make the results accessible to all Nigerians, but most importantly, I think the key of this court ruling, the court said that INEC must transmit the governor's polls results electronically, because there were instances that these devices could not work, and so INEC and officials, resulted in using other options that I don't know if they're allowed by the electoral laws in the country, because I know in Kenya, if for instance you the BVRs, here is the BVRs that identify for the voter identification. If they can't identify you, and then there is an option of using a physical voters register to get your details and to be identified. So that is provided for in the law. So I don't know if that is provided for in Nigeria's case, but the court said that must be through the electronic means. So there's something else also Efeni Ferre said about this. Now, the Pan-Yoruba socio-political organization, Afenifere, has condemned the outcome of the February 25th, 2023 presidential election won by the candidate of the All Progressives Congress, Bola Tinubu. The group also faulted the Independent National Electoral Commission on the conduct of the election, saying the commission did not comply with the electoral guidelines. This was contained in a communication issued after the general meeting of the group. The communication was made available to the local media and by the Secretary General of the Association, Mr. Sola Ebiseni, in Akure, the Ondo State capital, on Wednesday. According to the group, the alleged non-compliance with the electoral guidelines by the INEC caused a series of malpractices during the last general election. The communication read in part, the deliberate non-compliance by the Commission with these mandatory guidelines encouraged electoral what word is this that they use here? Brigandage of the polling units, which included the destruction of ballot papers, snatching of ballot boxes, doctoring of figures, and swapping of voters of candidates at the coalition centers by amended and outlawed manual procedures, which rendered the 25th February 2023 presidential and National Assembly elections flawed in several respects, as confirmed by local and international observers. The results of the lawful votes at the election available to the Afenifere through credible sources confirmed that His Excellency Peter Gregory Obi, the presidential candidate of the Labour Party, won the said election and with that support his decision challenging the contrary declaration by INEC. The group, which declared that the Labour Party's candidate, Mr. Obi, won the group declared that Mr. Peter Obi won the presidential election, denounced in strong terms and disassociated Afenifere from any congratulatory message in the name of the organization, and whosoever to any candidate as illegally declared by INEC. Now, Afenifere reiterates that for equity, fairness, national cohesion, and peaceful cooperation existence, the next president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria shall be a person of its southern part, and specifically southeast, the statement added. Now, the group called on Nigerians to troop out en masse and participate fully in the governorship and houses of assembly elections coming up. But that has since been postponed. They were citing the 11th of March, but now INEC has pushed that to the 18th of March. And I was watching an interview by, on the BBC, and INEC chairperson a couple of weeks back, when they were still, him and his team were preparing to carry out these elections, and he was very confident. And he was asked several times, are we going to see another postponement of any election this time in Nigeria? And he said no, with a straight face. He said, we have all our ducks in a row. All the preparations are going well. There's nothing for Nigerians to worry about. All the machines have been tested. So they were ready and they were geared to go. And now look at that. They had to postpone the governor's elections because of the problems the challenges they incurred during the presidential elections. So with these machines, so that essentially invalidates the presidential results and the presidential elections, because you can't tell us now we have to have confidence with those results delivered by the same machines that now you have to reconfigure because you're not sure if they're working so well for them to do a good job during the governor's election. By you declaring that you have to reconfigure these machines, you have invalidated the results of the presidential elections. You can't tell us those results are something were delivered in a manner that was credible and in a manner that Nigerians should be having confidence in them. It's not possible. It is the same machines, right? It is the same process. So if you have to work on and take care of it and fix the problem that was there even during the presidential elections, and then you have to do the whole thing all over again. I don't know if that will mean now all other because on the 25th of February, there was the presidential elections and the National Assembly elections. So I don't know if also the other results will be validated, because it is the same. It is the same beavers, right, as you call it. It is the same beavers. So if these elections were mad with these technical hitches that maybe as we wait to hear what the court will have to say over this matter, then if it's just wrong, then it was wrong all round. It was wrong all round. I think even the rest of the results will be invalidated because it is the same machines. So if the presidential elections and results were delivered through this process that is now apparently has to be worked on and fixed, then the rest of the other process, the rest of the election in the National Assembly also, I think also now some credibility is being cast against it. Okay, so INEC, I think, has failed Nigerians. These are things that they were supposed to test. They're supposed to have a test of these machines. They're supposed to make sure they get them in good time, because this was a new technology they were introducing, and bring in experts who could help in setting up, in fixing these machines, in running these tests, and just having that confidence in the ability to deliver a credible election. You are going, that's the reason why you incorporated technology in your election process, because you are going and you are aiming to have a credible election. And it appears these beavers had delivered you the exact opposite of why and of what you were looking to have through these beavers. And now there are questions that abound, and now you have to go fix these things, and now the credibility of these elections is at stake. And when you think about the amount of money that Nigeria used in preparation for this election, it is unacceptable. With all that money, Mr. Yakub and your team, I think it's Professor Yakubu and your team, you were supposed to do a good job. You're supposed to deliver a proper election to the people of Nigeria. And it is this kind of ineptness and impunity that some officials we put in these very important positions, and we trust to these very important processes in our countries. They fail to do their job. And as the U.S. Office of the State pointed, and as Commonwealth observers pointed, and other observers, Nigerians did their job, and Nigerians woke up so early to go and vote, for those who are able to go and vote, in the hopes that their voices will be heard through the ballots that they casted, and the ballots that they casted, were going to be treated in a manner that is reflects their will and their wishes as far as the leadership of the people they chose to elect to vote for were concerned. And now they're not even sure. They're not even sure. And INEC again has failed the people of Nigeria. And then you wonder why there was voter apathy. This kinds of drama that marred the 2019 elections, except this time it has been taken a notch higher, is maybe what even made more Nigerians decide, I will not even bother to turn up and vote, because if this process is not credible, and I'm not sure if my vote will really be counted in a manner that is transparent and that reflects my will, then why should I go out and vote? And this, as much as the elections in 2019 had a low voter turnout, this was the lowest, with 27% of Nigerians turning out to vote. 27%, and you spent all that money to prepare for these elections, the money that could have gone to other things that are also important for the people of Nigeria, and then you spend all this time acting like you're preparing for an election, and then you fail to deliver. There should be some laws in place that if there is an investigation that is done and finds these people, these government officials, like the chairperson of the INEC or the chairperson of IEBC for the case of Kenya, have in a way done something that has compromised the integrity of such a process, there should be some law in place that holds them culpable. They should not just be allowed to mess up elections, put the country in jeopardy and in chaos, and then they'll just retire, get their packs, and go home and live their best life. That should not be the case. We should put laws in place to ensure that if somebody deliberately does not do their job or acts in a way that contravenes the Constitution, there should be some penalty for that. There should be. If it is found that they deliberately did or knowingly allowed for a malpractice to happen, for a failure to happen. And when a former president, I almost forgot, Olusegun Obasanjo, on the voting day, he did not even wait to the next day when the votes are being counted. He wrote a scathing letter and he said, hey, we have to stop this process. President Buhari, can you save the country from this madness? Because what is going on and what has gone on in this process will lead Nigeria to chaos. Did President Olusegun Obasanjo not say that? And what was the response from Buhari's office? He called him bitter, he called him other names, and he did not bother to address the issue that Olusegun Obasanjo was raising. And now, days later, INEC itself is saying, you know what? Our machines have a problem. Our beavers must now be reconfigured, must be fixed now before we are ready for the governor's elections. I'll be waiting to see how this case will play out there, because I want to know, I want to hear how this case will go in the Nigerian courts, because this here is evidence. INEC has just presented evidence against itself. And INEC is saying we were ill prepared. INEC is saying we can't trust the results that were delivered by these machines from the presidential election. That's what you're saying. Otherwise, why are you reconfiguring them? If they were okay, you wouldn't need to reconfigure. And should the court order for these machines to be part of the evidence that will be scrutinized in the court, what are you going to do about it? Because now, as I sit here and talk about this, I think I'm sensing some old, I don't want to say ulterior motives. Because if INEC believes the machines needs to be reconfigured for a better gubernatorial elections, then maybe that's what needs to be done. But the court had ordered, and we know there's a case that will be filed in the courts very soon, and challenging and the failure of these machines. So these machines, I think they should not even be touched, because they might be part of the evidence that might be adduced in court. These machines provided for the results that were being tallied. They helped in that. So if you're going to reconfigure them before this case is heard, what are we doing? What will happen if they're needed, as part of the evidence in the proceedings of this case that is going to be, to be filed in this court, challenging their part, the part that they played in these elections, and then you've already reconfigured them. So now what happens? I'm not an IT person, but something is quite fishy there. Even with this reconfiguration move by INEC, I don't know, but there is a problem there. So the shifting by of the governorship and the assembly poll by a week, I think is it's something that it's going to be a problem. And then the commission took the decision as it at its management meeting in Abuja, which was convened on Wednesday after the Court of Appeal gave its go-ahead. That decision I was reading to you from the court, go-ahead to reconfigure bimodal voter accreditation machines. The meeting, which started at 7 p.m. and ended at 10 p.m., was presided over by its national chairperson, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu. In a statement by its National Commissioner and Chairman Information and Voter Education Committee, Festus Okoye, on Wednesday night, INEC said it could not go ahead with the governorship poll as earlier scheduled because it needed time to reconfigure Beaver's machines, which were used for the presidential elections on February 25th. The Court of Appeal had earlier on Wednesday granted permission to INEC to reconfigure beavers used for the presidential elections. The appellate court panel held that allowing the objections of the Labour Party and its presidential candidate Peter Obi would amount to tying the hands of the respondent, that is the INEC. In the wake of the declaration of the All Progressive Congress candidate Bola Tinubu as the president-elect, Obi had approached the appellate court where he secured an order restraining the commission from reconfiguring the beavers used for the elections. Okay? And the court handed down the order in the ruling it gave on Friday, granting permission to Obi and his People's Democratic Party counterpart Atiku Abubakar to inspect the sensitive materials used for the conduct of the elections. But the electoral body in an application asked the court to vary its order, restraining it from tampering with the beavers machines, which it argued had to be reconfigured for the governorship and state assembly polls. Delivering its ruling during the proceedings on Wednesday, which was attended by Labour Party standard-bearer and retinue of party bigwigs, the panel, presided over by Justice Joseph Akagi, dismissed the objections by Obi and his party and held that the backup files on the server could not be lost. But how do you know that? Now, delivering the lead ruling, Justice Haruna Samani said restraining INEC could affect next Saturday's governorship elections, and now we see how that has happened. And Sanami said constraining and restricting the respondent INEC from the use of beavers machines from any other purposes, and particularly considering the governorship and the Houses of Assembly elections coming up on the 11th of March 2013. Justice James Abundaga, who delivered the lead ruling in the motion of INEC by the variation of the Presidential Election Tribunal's earlier orders, struck it out for being unmeritorious. So that is what is happening. So he said he made the orders of 3rd March 2023, which are sought to be varied by this application. The court did not in any of those orders authorize the applicants to access the database of the applicant. The court did not order for Obi and the others who had filed this case to access the data that INEC had, which was the applicant. Okay, so the ruling is quite long. So, and just after that, that is when INEC went ahead and after the meeting it had last evening, said that because of the time they needed to reconfigure these beavers, the elections on the 11th was not going to happen, and so it had to be moved to the 18th of this month. It was moved by a week. The last time they moved the presidential elections, they did that by 2 weeks, but this time they did it in a week. So let me see. The president-elect Senator Bola Tinubu has been urged not to revenge against those who do not support his ambition to become the president. The leader of Oboni Aborigine Worldwide, Oba Adedoyese Olakisan, gave the advice in an open letter sent to Tinubu, copy of which was obtained in Osogbo on Wednesday. Olakisan, who also urged the incoming president to work diligently to rescue the country from her current economic hardships, noted that God has made Tinubu a father to all Nigerians. He also said the unity of the Yoruba nation would depend largely on Tinubu and asked him to work towards a restructured Nigeria. This restructuring of Nigeria, I don't know what he means, because everyone you speak to, they have their own version of what they feel Nigeria should be restructured and what they feel that should look like. But that is the latest in line with the elections that took place in Nigeria on the 25th of February. And now INEC has said that it is postponing the elections for the state governors to the 18th of March to allow the commission to have the beavers reconfigured so that they're able to do a better job during the upcoming elections, even as we wait for the cases challenging the presidential results to be filed in the courts there in Nigeria. I want to thank you so much for your time this morning. I'll see you later at 3 p.m. with more news from across the continent of Africa. My name is Miriam Ogutu. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.